This episode is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com, the #1 seller of games and gaming accessories. And GatheringMagic.com, the #1 resource for Magic the Gathering news and articles.
What's up, everyone? This is Josh, also known as Riker Rider, and here's my beloved Mayael the Anima Commander deck. Time was something that people complained about in my last feature, so I'm going to try to go through this a little more quickly, but I can't make any guarantees because I have more content to cover this time. Those of you who play Vanguard on Moto might recognize this as the alternate art for Mayael, specifically for her Vanguard avatar. I actually like this more than the original picture, so I ended up making one of these for use with the deck, just with new flavor text, which I'll put in the video, and just better artwork. I can put the original render in if the foiling is making this hard to read. I'll get to her later. There's an original pack foil that I use if people cry. And one thing that I have done for a long time is added personalities or original characters, whichever you like more, to each of my decks. And this is the one for the Mayael deck. You can read more about Shalin in the tale, The Mending of Alara, which is presently on MTGS. I'll link that as well. Now let's get into the bread and butter of the deck, the mana base. I have gone pretty much all out with this deck in terms of tracking cards for it. It took me about 3 years, but I was able to get everything in foil. I used to have a minor landfall theme with this deck, but I don't anymore because a lot of the landfall creatures ended up getting cut because they're just printing insane fat for this deck in sets. We've got our 3 fetch lands, Windswept Heath, Wooded Foothills, Arid Mesa, some more fetch lands, Krosan Verge. I could get this foil, but I don't really care for the old frame on it. I'm one of those guys that likes the new frame more than the old frame. Terramorphic Expanse, which probably shouldn't be in here anymore because the landfall theme is gone. I should probably just play a better land. I don't know what better land to play, though, because I'm playing pretty much every good set of lands. And Naya Panorama is also in here for theme. Probably should go as well, because that can only get basic lands. But I'm kind of a slave to theme when I build commander decks. Got the original duels. These should be pretty self-explanatory. Savannah, Taiga, Plateau. Shocklands. I was really glad I was able to get my Stomping Ground foil before it went up. I think I ended up getting my foil Stomping Ground for about 20. Sacred Foundry. We have the Shadowmoor Eventide Filter lands. I don't see these in a lot of lists, and I don't understand why, because I think that they are better than... I think that they're better than almost every dual land cycle you could be playing, except maybe the dual fetch shock. This is my go-to. A couple of Karus here. I'm not playing the red-white one because I have, I think, 2 spells in the deck that cost, well, more than 2, but I don't have very many spells that cost red-white. And I don't really like the tempo hit very much. They can also be used to reset hideaway lands, which is great. I have the Future Sight duels in here, Horizon Canopy. Very glad to have traded for this when it was cheap. I think I traded for the foil Horizon Canopy when it was $5, and now it's like 40-something. Grove the Burn Willows. I don't run any tricks with it. It's just another mana-fixing land that comes into play untapped, and you'll see why I like having my lands come into play untapped. Command Tower is Command Tower, should be in every deck. It's just great. Gemstone Mine. This is not the best land, but I really couldn't find another triple land that I wanted to... Oh, wow, they're falling apart. Did not need that to happen. The multicolored lands, I could not find a better land for this deck except maybe Tarnished Citadel. And Tarnished Citadel, it taps for colorless, yes, but tap, get any color, bolt you is just too much for me. Jungle Shrine, because it's the Naya Tri-land. I don't run that many tap lands, and this is one of them. Now let's get to our more utility-esque lands. Mosswort Bridge triggers with 2 creatures, maybe 1 if you get big enough one, but usually it's just 2 fatties triggers it. And you can put really mean things under here, like a surprise blocker. Spinerock Knoll, I only play in this deck in multiplayer, but since I play primarily multiplayer, I like this card. Most of the time, you can get an opponent to do your dirty work for you, just because of the size of the creatures you're playing, and it's hard to attack into them. Don't forget that you don't have to be the one that deals the damage. Contested Cliffs used to be a focal point of this deck, because there used to be a lot heavier of a beast theme in it, but I don't play that many beasts anymore. I think I only play 5. It's not something that I want to tutor up all the time like I used to, but Contested Cliffs is in here to pick off creatures if you have a beast, and it's just a great card. If any of you played back when this card was in Standard, wasn't it like a $10 card or something crazy? There was a whole deck in Standard built around this just because it's repeatable removal on a land. Kessig Wolf Run should be in every commander deck playing red and green, because it's just that good. I mean, it's a repeatable fireball. If any of you have ever played against this land in Limited, it's so hard to come back from it. Like, all the spell lands were so good in Limited. Reliquary Tower, because of people's like prosperities and things like that. There's a lot of people around here that play draw artifacts as well, and when you drop something like Greater Good, you'll have more cards than you know what to do with. And I just think Reliquary Tower is a commander staple and should be in every deck. Just every deck that plans on going past like turn 5, just because of how many cards you can draw. And it just really sucks having to discard 10 cards to maximum hand size. Next is Strip Mine, because Strip Mine lands need to go. Tectonic Edge, because lands need to go. I have not been able to track down a Judge Wasteland yet, and I would really like to do it sooner than later because they are dropping in price. I think they're like 80. But I would rather find one in trade, because I have a lot of trade stuff. It's just finding the right person. Winding Canyons is a land that is really underplayed in decks that make a lot of mana, especially Mono Green. Mono Green loves Winding Canyons because you don't have to commit mana on your turn again to play anything that, anything that is a creature, and if you're Mono Green, you're going to be a creature deck. But even in this deck, the deck makes so much mana that you never have to commit to playing a creature or sitting on Mayael. Yeah, but Maya Hollow is a way usually to protect Mayael if I don't have a Shroud outlet for her. But I've done really silly things with this card, like, say, when I didn't want my board cleared, I would use that to regenerate, say, somebody's Ryusei that I didn't want dying. And I've got 5 basics in here, 3 forests. You might notice that they're all the Naya-themed basics from Shards of Alara, and that is very purposeful. It actually took me a while to track down these particular foil basic lands. After this, we'll get into our fat. We've got 5 beasts. Vagrant Plowbeasts is a card that I rarely see in Mayael lists, and because this deck made it into Commander's, or this deck was in Commander's Arsenal, being one of the 10 oversizes. It's a really popular commander, but I see Vagrant Plowbeasts absent from so many Mayael lists. I don't understand why. It just says 1, regenerate target fat, making it difficult to kill your guys, makes wrathing unprofitable. And everybody plays Spearbreaker in their lists, but not this guy, and I don't understand why that is. Rampaging Baloths is a bit of a leftover from when I had the Landfall sub-theme, but he's still good, because he triggers contested cliffs and makes 4/4s every time you play a land. One very important thing you'll need to remember when playing this deck, especially if you're playing the landfall creatures, is keep your fetch lands open as long as possible. Don't try to... what is it? Like, try to keep those open so you can take advantage of those abilities. Admonition Angel is a card that comes to mind for that. Godsire is just ridiculous. An 8/8 that makes 8/8s. And has Vigilance, so it can attack and make an 8/8 beast in the same turn. It's just such a stupid good card in this deck. Spearbreaker Behemoth, enough has been said about this guy in all the Mayael threads. Basically, he makes your team wrath-proof. This is something that they just have to exile, or they just can't win. And my last beast is Krosan Tusker. A lot of people omit this guy from their list too, but I like it because it's a Mayael target that isn't dead. One thing that you want to make sure when building a Mayael deck is make sure that all your creatures serve a dual purpose. Like this guy, he's just a 6/5, he's on the board, but he can find a basic land and draw a card, so he's either a 2-for-1. Well, he's going to be pretty much a 2-for-1 no matter what, because he gets one of your opponent's removal spells, can be a surprise blocker if you put him in off of Mayael, or he gets you a basic land and a card early. I really like this guy. Now I'll move on to some of the angels in the deck. I'm playing all the Powerpuff Girls I can. Sigarda's just really stupid. Incredibly hard to interact with outside of a Wrath, and if you make her indestructible with like a Spearbreaker, she has to basically be Terminist. She just is not going anywhere. Unfortunately, I ended up getting this one relatively close to release, so I did overpay for it. The same with the Gisela, but they're both stunning foils. I really wish you guys could see this deck in person, because the deck is just like that. Gisela I said a bunch about in Bassandra. She's arguably better here just because your creatures are dealing gigantic amounts of damage already. And Avacyn, there's not really much to be said about her. She's really broken. And I'm actually really surprised that she didn't get the axe in more groups. I already know one group that's banned her. Just because of how hard she is to deal with, and if you can give her like a Greaves or something, they have to Terminus your board or they can't do anything. Akroma is an awesome white finisher still, just because she's hard to remove, hard to interact with. I mean, she can be pathed, just like Avacyn, and she can get killed by other things, but she's still good enough to be played in here. Baneslayer Angel. A lot of people don't like Baneslayer Angel in Commander, but I do, just because her protection is really, really relevant. A lot of people love playing big dragons. Demons not so much, but dragons are everywhere in Commander. You drop this against a Kalia deck and they just cry until they can kill her. Angel Serenity is one card in here that I can get foil, but I haven't yet. I'm kind of waiting for her to drop. She hasn't been putting up a lot of results in Standard, and she has dropped quite a bit from 25 to like 18. I don't think I want to pull the trigger on the foil until she drops a little bit more. But she's also really hard foil to track down. I only know one person in my play group that even has one, and he's using it and doesn't want to trade it, unfortunately. But she's really, really good. Like, you can start looping her in Eternal Witness, and it's incredibly hard to deal with her. Also in other decks, if you have something like a Crystal Shard or an Erratic Portal, she can exile creatures from the battlefield and graveyards and make them never come back. When I was looking for a 5-power creature with graveyard hate, I was more thinking along the lines of like a 5/5 for 5 that when it comes into play crypt somebody. But this is beyond my wildest dreams. She's just incredible. I've got a few dragons in here as well, starting with Utvar Hellkite. I wouldn't play this unless you have enough dragons to make it worth it. You don't need a dedicated dragon deck because he makes a 6/6 upon attacking and can get out of control by himself. Obviously, he's best in a dedicated dragon deck, but I think I have enough to make it worth playing him. I have Yosei, which has a whole bunch of political applications, makes it hard for you to be attacked. I picked this guy up really cheap, too. I traded for him when he was 12, and now he's something like 30. Balefire Dragon is just awesome. He just absolutely stops token decks dead. They can't make any kind of army until they kill him, unless they have, like, a monument. And you can't attack into it if they have a monument anyway. Bogardan Hellkite has been going in and out of the deck. It's probably been in and out of the deck 4 or 5 times. But I put him back in here because he's a fatty that's not dead in your hand. One of the issues with Mayael is drawing a lot of fatties, because you don't want to draw them, you want them on top of your deck. And I'll get into how I mitigate that a little bit later in the video. But Hellkite's just good. And I've chosen to use the from the Vault Dragons version instead of like a foil M10 one because of the flavor text. It's the only version of Bogardan Hellkite that has flavor text. Scourge of Carriages was something that I overlooked when I originally built this deck. The Mayael deck was the first EDH deck I ever built. And it's evolved quite a bit in the 3 years that I've had it. Well, it's actually more like 4 now. Scourge is just good because it can pick off little dudes. And one thing that this deck does have problems with is lots of little creatures, because you can have a giant fatty, like some 20/20 fatty. It's one of the reasons why I'm not playing Serra Avatar in here, otherwise I would, is that Serra Avatar just gets chump blocked all day. This prevents people from chump blocking your guys. Blazing Archon is in here to say go somewhere else. It's a lot more useful than it is in the Bassandra deck. I really wish I could have tracked down a pack foil, but the Graveborn foil still looks fine. This is probably, like for the Ravnica City of Guilds one, it's one of the most breathtaking foils in Magic. I have the 2 legal Eldrazi Titans in here, Ulamog and Kozilek. They're just some of the biggest creatures in the game. Annihilator gives you so much inevitability, and just Ulamog's a pain in the butt to deal with, period. And World Spineworm is the biggest fatty legal in Commander. He can make 3/5/5s when they kill him. The anti-reanimation clause is irrelevant. Well, I guess it's not completely irrelevant because he's a free shuffle if you pitch him to, say, survival or something. So the reshuffling can be useful. And I've just got other generic fatties in here, like Avenger Zendikar. Not as good without his buddy Primeval Titan, but he's still worth playing because he makes a bunch of blockers. And can just be a surprise army. Trastodon is Trastodon. Just, he's obnoxious. The Vorinclex, which is one of the cards that I would actually recommend taking out if you're playing in a more casual group. This build is more for untrusted groups. It tries to be fun, but it's also very powerful, and has some cards that can be tough to deal with. Like, nobody wants to kill this guy, even though he needs to go as soon as you drop him, because nobody wants to take the tempo hit. And if you don't have a way to answer him, he puts you ahead of the table by like 4 times as far as mana goes. Dragonlair Spider is a new addition to the deck from Plane Chase 2 and Commander's Arsenal. I really like this guy because he makes little durdles that prevent you from getting attacked by just generic creatures. Well, maybe not prevent, but they just having extra blockers around is nice in case somebody tries to edict you or something. And this was the filler card in Commander's Arsenal, but I really like using it, and I wanted to find a place to use it anyway. I think I'm using everything from that except the Glacial Chasm. That was Realms, but I'm using, I think, all but one of the cards from Arsenal. Stalking Vengeance basically says don't Wrath. I really like this guy, and I see him omitted from Mayael lists as well. And I think that's all the fat. It's 25 fat. 25 fat's the minimum you should be playing. I have the rest of my utility spells sorted in order. Oh, right, number of fat. 25 to 30 is a good number to play. Once you get lower than 25, you start missing with her ability too much. And 6 mana to put into that ability is a lot. One of the problems with running Mayael is there are very few things on the table that are going to get targeted more than her because she just spits out fat every turn. And from my experience, she gets targeted so much that you often can't use her. And especially if you have a meta that has a lot of blue decks, you might even want to consider playing Cavernous Souls in this deck just so she doesn't get spell crumpled. Because the deck is quite frankly in a lot of trouble if she gets spell crumpled or hindered. I have Lightning Greaves to protect her, Swiftfoot Boots to protect her. Steely Resolve usually names Elf unless somebody's playing Elves, in which case you might want to be careful. I mean, setting it to Elf even against an Elf deck can be fine because they can't untap like their Priest of Titania or whatnot, but usually you'll want to set it to Elf. You can set it to whatever type you need to protect if you already have a Shroud Outlet for her, but generally this gets set to Elf. Then Asceticism turns all your creatures into Troll Ascetics, which is just incredible. I got this foil when it was $2, and now it's gone up quite a bit as well. And Privileged Position. If you have Privileged Position and Asceticism, it can really make it very hard for people to get through. And now for my Mana Accelerators. Bloom Tender is the best Mana Accelerator in the deck because it's one of the few things in the deck that will let you cast Mayael on turn 4. Soul Ring is Soul Ring, should be in every deck. Cultivate finds 2 basics. You do need to be careful if you're running this kind of mana base how many things you play that find basic lands. I used to play Deep Reconnaissance in here as well, but I ended up cutting it because so many games I would go to Flashback Deep Reconnaissance and I wouldn't have a basic land left to fetch. Farseek finds dual lands. I was really surprised to find out that Farseek is a $4 common. Like $4 foil common. And Reap and Sow is another way to kill annoying lands like Maze of Ith. And you can find Contested Cliffs, Yavimaya Hollow, whatever you need. If you need to reset a hideaway land, you can get a Crew with it. Gets any land, it's great. Nature's Lore. Can we get a Nature's Lore reprint in M14 to go with the shock lands? Because that would be really nice. And this thing really needs to be foiled. Mirari's Wake, doubles mana. Makes your guys bigger. I don't really think I have much of a way to make Mayael 5 power, but that's normally not too relevant, because if all your creatures are getting killed, it's by a Wrath, not by spot removal. And Mana Reflection is Mana Reflection. It's just a green staple. Now, with all these fatties, you're going to have... You're going to want to have a way to cheat fatties into play. Piper does that. I used to not like Piper before I was playing all this protection, but if you can protect Piper, the fact that it's a 4-mana 1/1 shouldn't bother you if you have any sort of Shroud Outlet, like Greaves or Steely Resolve or anything. Next is Quicksilver Amulet. I was actually really surprised to open this from a pack because I've been trying to trade for it for a while, and it just happened to show up in some random prize pack. It's just another Piper that's colorless, and it's an artifact, so it's a little harder to interact with. If you have one of these and Mayael active, it's very hard for you to be attacked. Defense of the Heart is pretty much the mother of all creature cheating cards. You drop this when somebody has 3 creatures out. They either wrath the creatures away, which is good for you, or they let this go off, and then you can get some dumb thing like Avacyn and Sigarda, or Blazing Archon and Sigarda, or some combination of creatures that you can either turtle behind or win the game from. I've used it to get 2 Eldrazi Titans before, but I usually don't do that because I think that's boring. Tooth and Nail is just another Defense of the Heart that you can play from your hand. And this is the one deck where I have used Tooth and Nail on 7 just to put 2 dudes into play. Usually you don't do that, but as far as I know, this is the only deck I've seen that casts Tooth and Nail not entwined. Lurking Predators, when I saw this previewed in 2010, I thought that this thing was made for this deck. Every time you cast this, or when you cast this, every time an opponent casts a spell, you have a chance at getting a free fatty. It's really, really powerful if you have like a top or a scroll rack or anything to set up the top of your deck. It's really powerful with scroll rack, and I'll get more into the scroll rack interactions when I get to that card. Court of Calling is just incredible. You do have to pay for the creature, though, because you do put mana or creatures into it. People forget the Convoke on this card, too. A lot of people have told me to put Green Sun Zenith in here, but I think Court of Calling is better because it's an instant. And it can get any creature, not just green creatures, although most of the creatures you'd want to get in this deck are green. I had thought about putting Green Suns in here, but I don't think I have room for both of them. When you've been working on a deck for 3-4 years, deck space tends to get pretty tight. Genesis Wave isn't amazing without a mana doubler, but I think it's worth it just to be able to go, say, Wake into a wave for 12 plus. I wouldn't recommend casting Genesis Wave in this deck for anything less than 6, because if you cast it for less than 6, you're going to miss out on a lot of fat, and there's very little fat in this deck that costs less than 6. Gotta have some removal, some ways to clear the board, some ways to deal with problem permanents. Day of Judgment is just your staple Wrath. I did consider playing Wrath of God, but I want to interact with regenerating creatures a little bit better because I have things like Vagrant Plowbeasts. If I didn't play Vagrant Plowbeasts, I would definitely play Wrath over this, because there are a lot of really annoying regenerating creatures out there. Austere Command is probably my favorite Wrath in Commander. I said this in the Bassandra feature, but I'm going to say it again. It destroys whatever you want, spares your fatties. Like, probably my most used mode in this deck for Austere Command is artifacts and small guys. Find this. Bright Flame is probably, like, you definitely should be playing this in duels, but in multiplayer it's unbelievably good. You just zap the creature with the most colors and watch your life total climb into triple or even quadruple digits if there's enough players or there's a guy playing tokens. It is a late game spell, and you generally have to have a Mana Reflection or a Mirari's Wake for it to be useful, but I really love it. Ancient's Tread. Now, there is Warstorm Surge out there. I'm playing Ancient's Tread over it primarily for flavor, because in this deck, Warstorm Surge is pretty much strictly better. But it has flavor text from my commander on it. And I just like the name of the card, too. And Chaos Warp was actually in here only when I got Commander's Arsenal. I used to play Path, but the ability to answer non-creatures, like, one of the things that really puts a damper on this deck is Moat. and just having more ways to deal with moat. This can also answer lands, too. And that's something people forget about Chaos Warp, is you can get lands with it. Generally, you don't want to be nailing lands, but you can get lands. As a matter of fact, in all the Commander games I've played, I don't think I've ever seen Chaos Warp used on a land like somebody's coffers. Ulvenwald Tracker is also a recent addition to this deck. He's basically another contested Cliffs that can interact with any creature type. And if you can put, like, a Boots on him, he just gets bananas. I was fortunate enough to open this out of a pack as well. Krosan Grip. Unfortunately, I did not win this one. This was one of the few promos I have in this deck that I had to actually purchase. But Krosan Grip is Krosan Grip, just really good. Split second, so it gets tops. And control decks generally rely on their artifacts to win, so they can't counter it. Being uncounterable is very relevant. Top is top. And I also have some other top deck manipulation in here. Worldly Tutor basically breeds 7, search your deck for a creature and put it into play. Or whatever cheating mechanism you may have. The other thing that I do with this, I rarely use this outside of using it with a cheating mechanism to put a creature in play, but you can use it on turn 1 to grab Bloom Tender to set up for your turn 4 activation, or if you feel safe about it, you can get Seedborn Muse with it. Enlightened Tutor finds Greater Good, Lightning Greaves, Survival, basically whatever pertinent thing you need. Scroll Rack is just... wow, a lot of cards are falling over here. Well, those of you who have played against it know that Scroll Rack's just sickening, especially in this deck. One of the things you can do with it is you can rack to put something on top of your deck and put it into play with Mayael. But one thing you can also do with it is you can put the fat in there along with a bunch of garbage cards in your hand, draw new cards from your deck, activate Mayael, put the fatty into play, and flush all those garbage cards to the bottom of your deck. I really love doing that, and you can do it again and again and again to get rid of cards you don't need. Sylvan Library is basically another... wow. Slippery sleeves. Yeah, these are the sleeves from the Commander's Arsenal box as well. Generally, when somebody has their deck in these kinds of sleeves, they mean business. Sylvan Library is basically another Sensei's Divining Top that you can force draws, but I hate forcing draws with Sylvan Library because it costs so much life. Greater Good is in here just because with the amount of fat you have in this deck, any creature that you have that's on its way to the graveyard becomes massive card advantage. I got this thing for cheap, too. And I think these are foil Greater Goods are pushing above 50 now. And even for that price, they're just really hard to find. They don't come up very often because 9th edition was not a very well received set. Rings of Bright Hearth, I've heard a lot of people want me to cut, but I think this is an excellent card because you can not only duplicate Mayael's ability, you can duplicate fetch lands, you can duplicate like the draw from a Sensei's Divining Top. There's enough activated abilities you can duplicate that this is worth playing. Survival is survival. Also, you can do a lot of neat tricks with survival plus top. You can go, like before you activate Mayael, you can go top, and if there's no fat in your top 3, you can discard something to survival to shuffle your deck, then top again, see if there's fat in there, and basically just keep repeating until you have fat on top. You can also get stuff out of your graveyard with Survival of the Fittest if you dump an Eldrazi Titan, because the reshuffle trigger will resolve first. Seedborn Muse is just disgusting with Mayael, lets you activate Mayael on every player's turn, rather than just once per turn. It's like, usually she gets fried she gets fried immediately. But if no one has an answer to her, she just provides disgusting card advantage. Especially if you have any kind of mana sink. Like, Seedborn Muse is just really good with mana sinks, period. And what do I have? Just a couple more cards here. Ewit's pretty self-explanatory. Generally, if you tooth and nail, you should get Ewit and something. I like Ewit Angel Serenity a lot. And the last card in the deck is True Conviction. Gives all your creatures double strike and lifelink. It should just completely turn the game around. The lifelink is probably the most relevant part, since you're going to be getting picked on for a lot of the mid-game. This can really get your life total back to where it belongs. Thank you for watching this presentation of Mayael the Anima, brought to you by CMDR Decks. Please remember to like, favorite, and subscribe.